Hello, this is Dana Arcuri, author, speaker, survivor, and advocate from danaarcuri.com. And today's topic is about my codependent mother who recently passed away. It is still very fresh, very real, very raw. This is a difficult topic and a video for me to be very authentic and just share my candid story. Thank you in advance for your respect and sensitivity to this video. And so we must understand that when anyone, especially children, are raised with an abusive parent or a narcissistic parent and or siblings, that it could become a very toxic environment. It's very unhealthy. It impacts us on every level, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Later on in relationships, it impacts our wellness and so much more. Now, oftentimes in a codependent relationship, children don't understand that it's codependent. We are too young, we are innocent, and at that level of age, young children, and then even growing up and being teenagers and eventually adults, we may not realize that there is a dynamic that is very codependent. When I look back on my childhood, so I kind of reflect, I look back, which I guarantee I've been doing in this past month, I definitely can see that my mother had wanted me to be dependent on her, to be codependent on her. She would always say things to me, and it was almost like a brainwashing, where she would say that she didn't think I could make it without her, that I would fall apart if I didn't have her in my life. She would basically insinuate that I had no strength, that I had no courage, and that I was just this easily wounded child. I'm coming to find out after all these years that I am so much stronger than my mother or even my own self gave myself credit for. I have been through hell and back in this relationship with my mother as well as my siblings. And I have learned so much. And the one thing I've learned is I have a lot more courage and a lot more strength and a lot more, just this feistiness about me, where I rise up above obstacles, above opposition, and above abusive, toxic relationships, that I don't let it dictate me nor my life, because I'm so much more. I'm so much more, and I deserve better. And I know that. I walk and I stand and I embrace myself, who I am at the soul core level, who I am and who I was made to be, who I was created to be, my destiny, my purpose. I embrace that because I stand very confident in who I am as a human being on earth who has this wonderful soul mission, healing, health, and hope. And so let's go on and just chat just a little bit, though, about codependence before I get into the nitty-gritty of my story about my mom passing away. So codependence does involve one person who is manipulating, who is basically trying to control another person. They're trying to overpower you. So this is very common. Now in Psych Central, I did some research, and in Psych Central it says, codependency is characterized by a person belonging to a dysfunctional, one-sided relationship where one person relies on the other for meeting nearly all of their emotional and self-esteem needs. And so we can understand that this whole thing with narcissistic abuse, child abuse, psychological abuse, bullying and mobbing, and the stalking and all the maliciousness that goes on, especially online, on social media, we can understand that, it cannot dictate who we are. It cannot dictate how we respond. While there could be people who have very sinister agendas to try to harm us and hurt us, we have to stand strong in who we are and believe in ourselves and know that we are doing everything we can in our own power to live up to our full potential and not let anyone bring us down or try to destroy our lives and our passion and our purpose. And next is that let's start talking now about before, during, and after my mother passed away. So before my mother passed away, I was already in no contact with her. Okay, so my mother passed away in July 2020, and I had already been no contact with her for over 1 year. I have not actually seen my mother for close to 2 years. I haven't spoken to her on the phone for well over 1 year. Okay, so it's very clear communication ended, the relationship ended. I chose to walk away from this toxic relationship. This is how I knew that it was best for me, it was in my best interest to heal without anyone hindering my progress and restoration. So, it's no surprise that the things that happened in 2019 after my father passed away in May 2019, it's no surprise that a lot of the things that my toxic siblings did to me, such as not informing me that my dad was on his deathbed, not telling me or notifying me that he passed away, and intentionally, purposefully keeping all of this information, including his memorial, from me, it only speaks volumes of who they are. These are people who at the core of their being have evil intentions. And I can't concern myself with them or with their problems because it's their problem. And I rise above anything that they're doing. Their lives are no longer part of my life. As far as I'm concerned, my siblings are dead. And while some people may think that could be cruel, no, it's part of how I heal, how I continue to walk the path of healthy boundaries and having peace of mind and removing any people, weeding out people who don't love me, don't care about me, who don't value me, and who go to great lengths to try to hurt me. And so in 2019, it was no surprise. My siblings set out, they aimed to hurt me in any form or fashion that they could do so. They went on a power trip as far as making certain the facility where my father was staying, because he had Alzheimer's, they made sure that I was not on the list to be told and informed about my father who was dying and then passed away. So I get it. I get what was going on. I understand the manipulation that was happening behind closed doors. They may think they're smooth and sly, but I figured it out. And so I already knew a year ago, after I had already gone into contact with my mother, I had already known there's very good chance that my siblings will do the same thing if my mother would be on her deathbed or if my mother would pass away. And let's be clear, anyone who's in their 80s or heading into their middle 80s, that's a pretty long life. So I knew my mother's days were numbered. And, in all honesty, hey, I have already been doing the grief work, the healing work, the abuse recovery work, the working through compounded trauma and complex PTSD and the toxic siblings and my mother triangulating my relationship with my father and triangulating my relationship with my siblings. And I've already done a lot of work. So because 2 years ago was when I actually cut the ties with my family, I haven't been in contact with my sisters or their families for close to 2 years. Okay, so I already was on a new pathway. I was rebuilding my life and I was doing the hard work of healing. So starting 2 years ago, I began the anticipatory grief, knowing, my relationship is over with my mother, and so I knew that good chance those siblings will make certain this time around that no, they won't inform me when my mother's on her deathbed. They won't inform me when she passes away. I pretty much grasped that this was my reality and I released it. Part of awakening up to the truth, part of acknowledging, yes, this is very, very, very unhealthy for me. It's being honest. It's walking in acceptance. It's just releasing people who hurt you and just taking no part in the three-ring circus. Okay, so let's fast forward then to the beginning of July. I received a text message from my son, and he had heard from my nephew that my mother had been in a nursing home, and then she was moved into hospice, and he stated to my son that my mother was on her deathbed. Okay, so this is last month. And when my son notified me of this, number one, I was grateful to know in advance, even though it was very short, notification. After this was told to me, I didn't know, does she have days? Does she have months? I was told that her kidney was shutting down. Well, I've done a lot of research in the past. I've been really intrigued with death, dying, and the afterlife. And so I've already done a lot of research, a lot of really excellent books that talk about, what are the signs of dying. And so the first sign of dying is the kidneys go into failure. And then slowly, one by one, each organ will fail. So I knew in my research that kidneys are the first thing that go, and it's not the last. So I didn't think that my mom would pass away right away. I actually thought she might still be around in a couple weeks, following that phone call. But regardless, I had already gone no contact, and this is really important that I say this and really clarify. No contact, there is a rule with no contact. You don't break your no contact rule. The number one thing is once you go no contact, you stay no contact. You stand firm in your boundaries. You focus on self-care. You focus on your healing. If there's a wedding and you know that the toxic people or narcissists will be there, you don't attend. It's that simple, people. If someone passes away, you don't go to the funeral if you know the toxic people will be there. And so part of going no contact is you have to really stand firm in your own recovery, because if you permit yourself to start going to family functions and parties and Christmas parties and gatherings and bridal showers and baby showers and graduations where you will go face to face with either the narcissist, any predator who might be in your family. So if there's sexual predators, in my case there is in my family, through marriage, we will have to decide, do we really want to cross paths with people who are hurtful, people who have tried to silence us, people who have told us that we're the problem, people that have psychologically, physically, or sexually abused us? Do we really want to do that? Well, in the no contact rule, no, you never attend any social gatherings, functions, etc., and that is the end of the story. Okay, so let's make it real clear. I never ever planned to ever see my mother again. In 2019, when she had that last call, that last conversation with me, in which she chose hate over love, and she chose pride over humility, I know I would never ever see her again. I told her, if you choose to mistreat me and continue treating me like a doormat, I will never ever see you again. And she said, then you will never ever see me alive again. And she slammed the phone on me. So I came to terms with that. That's why, anticipatory grief is a big part of this topic, is because, a year ago, I had to allow myself to grieve that there's the death of a relationship. My mother last year was alive, but our relationship was broken. It was done. It was dead. And so I had already started the whole grief process. And I think that is why I'm actually handling grief so much better now that she actually did pass away this year. And then now I was finally told, that she passed away several days after the call from my son stating that my mother was on her deathbed and her kidneys were shutting down. Okay, so now we'll go to just one little snippet of before my mother passed away. There was a lot of going back and forth between my son, my nephew, and this text messaging of my son telling me, well, your nephew said such and such. And then he just he was basically just kept calling me and texting me and telling me, he said this, he said that. There was a lot of things going on that were stressful because I really believe that while I do love my nephew, unfortunately he landed in the middle of the family mess but I don't know where he stands on it. And I don't talk to him because, again, once I cut ties with my mother, then I cut ties with my siblings. Usually when you go no contact with a narcissist, other people will shame you, blame you, manipulate you. They'll start gaslighting you, mobbing you, stalking you, and they will try to hurt you, and they'll try to destroy you. Okay, so this is what I've already dealt with, okay? And so, it's challenging when, there's someone who's part of your family and you're no longer talking to them and they're saying all these things and it was to my son, and then my son would then tell me. And there was one point where my nephew did make a comment to my son that I was not pleased with, and I'm not even going to say what it was. All I'm going to say is it was definitely something that my toxic siblings would have said. It was definitely something that I definitely believe would have come out of the mouth of my siblings who would have said it to my nephew, and then my nephew then he said this, he texted this to my son. There's never a dull moment when you have a family that is unhealthy and it's toxic and you're no longer even a part of the family unit anymore. So let's go now to, it is July 8th, 2020. I wake up in the morning. It was just 2 days after being told that my mother was on her deathbed. And I had already been praying. I had already been asking God to give my mother forgiveness, to give her peace, to take her out of pain. I asked him, please comfort my mother in her time of taking her last breath, her last moments on earth, despite what my mother has done to me, despite the maliciousness, the child neglect and abuse, the psychological abuse as an adult, and all of the craziness, I still love my mother. She's still my mother. She will always be my mother. And I am someone who really believes in, prayer and believes that I need to be the bigger person. And so I did, I prayed and pleaded to God to minister to my mother. And I prayed for him to be with her and comfort her and to forgive her. And so it was July 8th, 2020. I was getting up. It was early in the morning. And I was actually in really good spirits that day. I was kind of taken back that I was feeling lighter. I was feeling happier. I was feeling at peace. I just felt like there was I don't even know how to explain it. Almost like there was this whole hedge of protection around me. And I could just feel like God embracing me. I could feel love. I felt joy. I felt happy. Something seemed to shift. I felt a shift. I felt that something changed. And, a lot of people who aren't into spirituality may not understand that things that do go on the spiritual realm, people who, like me, who have this prophetic mantle upon them and who are very, 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 I have a very spiritual soul. I have a lot of beliefs, and it's not based on religion. I've left organized religion. I am so much more than some organized, rigid, legalistic religion. I am more about relationship, I believe in a higher power. I believe in God. And so I woke up and I knew that there was a shift, and I was feeling lighter and feeling happier. And I'm like, I'm going to color my hair today. So my roots needed done. And with this whole thing with social distancing and lockdown, I've been doing a lot of just coloring my own hair because I'm a licensed hairdresser. So, hey, I get the discount, I get wholesale, and I decided to color my hair. So there it is. It's early in the morning and I'm feeling pretty good. And so I was getting ready to color my hair when my phone rang. And I know, there's just something intuitively that I know before I even answered the phone. I knew that it was my son, and I knew my mother passed away. And so I started talking to my son, and he solemnly, very gracefully told me that my mother passed away, that it was on July 8th, very, very early in the morning. One sister was there with my mother, and I am really thankful, actually, that it was this particular sister. If I could have handpicked who would have been with my mother, if there could only be one of us out of us 5 girls, if there could only be one of us who could be with my mother, who would I handpick? All I could say is, God answer my prayer. It was the sibling who I would have chosen. I'm glad it was her that was with my mother. I believe she would have given my mom the grace, the compassion, and the prayer that my mom needed at that time. And so I am grateful for that. When my son, gave me this bad news, I didn't react and respond at all how I had thought in the past that I would respond. You always kind of wonder, like, how will I feel when my mother passes away? I always kind of guessed, but I didn't know for certain. But I could say that I was calm, cool, collect. I didn't break down in tears. I asked some important questions. But the bottom line was that I was relieved. The biggest emotion I had was relief. Relief that my mother was no longer in physical pain. Relief that my mother is no longer struggling with her traumatic life. I sincerely believe that saying, hurting people hurt other people, it's true. I do now realize that my mother was hurting badly, and I may not know all the reasons why. I don't really know everything that happened to her in her lifetime, but I know some important things that did happen, and I can understand that she may have just brought her trauma wounds into her family as a mother, as a parent, and that she was not able to be the parent I needed. And so I could release that. I could forgive her. I could just look at how much this has taught me. I'm thankful for the mother I am. I'm thankful that I rose above my trauma to be a better mother, a better parent for my kids. It's one thing to be raised in a dysfunctional home, but we have a choice as adults to not let generational abuse continue, and to not just repeat again and again and again the same abuse and the same horrible traumas. Our kids deserve so much better, and I'm very thankful for my close relationship with my kids, that they believe in me, they understand why I went no contact. My kids are actually the people who inspired me, who helped me, who encouraged me to break all contact with my entire birth family. It was my children who really woke me up back in 2017. And so, I think my kids saw things that I may not have consciously wanted to see. And it's because abuse hurts so much. It's so hard to come to grips with that your mother's a narcissist, and that your siblings are jealous, toxic, malicious, hurtful, sinister, evil people who will judge you, who will do everything they can to lash out at you and to try to destroy you. And once again, we can't fix them and we can't change them. And that's why we leave them and we end the relationship and we say goodbye, because we deserve so much better. Next, I want to say that I'm looking at my notes. Let me catch up to speed on my notes. Regardless of how anyone feels about me and my relationship with my mother, it's no one's place to dictate to me whether I can or cannot be in a relationship with my mother, whether I can or can't respond or feel a certain way. My relationship with my mother has always been about just me and my mom. And it's no one else's business what happens between me and my mom. And my siblings wanted to put their noses where it didn't belong. They wanted to overstep my boundaries. They triangulated my relationship with both my mother and father, especially my father. I think they loved that my dad and I, for many, many years, had a broken relationship. I think that in 2017, when my father and I restored our relationship, and I visited him several times, 2018 also, and my dad and I made peace, we reconciled. It was beautiful, but I definitely believe, based on the reactions, negative behaviors, the gaslighting, and the horrific name calling and really cruel things that they said following this visit, and following, like, I was on seventh heaven, so excited and blessed that my dad and I restored a relationship. And yet they were like raining on my parade. They were ticked off. They didn't want my dad and I making peace. They loved that my dad and I were at odds. And when my mom and I went no contact, I think my sisters were having a field day. They were probably having a big party, streamers and cake and blowing their horns and the whole thing with that. I think that they loved it because they were always jealous of me. Prior to going no contact in 2018 with my mom, I really had a close relationship with my mother for most of my life. So for like 50 years of my life, my mom and I were very close. So regardless that she was toxic and abusive and malicious, and there were so much horrible things happening behind closed doors with her, I still really had a very close relationship with her. I loved her. I spent a lot of time with her. When she had surgery, brain surgery, who was there to take her to the hospital? Me. Who was the one after her surgery and she returned home and the surgeon said she has to have someone take care of her? Who was the one who was selfless and took care of her? Me. I was the one who stayed home. They could say whatever they want to say. They could say whatever they want to say. And we know how the toxic siblings always distort the truth. They might take a thread of the truth, but they will distort it, they will twist it, and they will do everything they can to discredit me. But I know who I am. I have confidence in myself. I know that I was a good daughter. I know that I was a supportive daughter, And so at the end of the day, I can look myself in the eyes. When I look in the mirror, I can look at myself and know that I did everything humanly possible to restore my relationship with my mother all the way up from birth to the year of 2018. I tried and I tried and I tried and I did the best that I could. And you talk about forgiveness. This whole thing with narcissistic motherhood and me being this family scapegoat, I didn't choose that. And somehow in 2018, when I stood my ground and formed those healthy boundaries, all hell broke loose. Why? Because the narcissist doesn't want me to have healthy boundaries. The toxic siblings disrespect my healthy boundaries. They will trample all over it, and they have over and over and over again. And interestingly enough, the day after my mother passed away, my siblings, behind my back, without telling me, purposefully, intentionally, making certain that I did not know, they planned a memorial banquet, kind of like a reception for my mother. And of course, they didn't invite me. They didn't tell me. They didn't notify me. Now think about this. My mother passes away on July 8th. And very quickly, they have this memorial. this means that they must have planned it ahead of time. They must have known already her days were numbered, her days were short, she was in hospice. Number one, I was never told she was in a nursing home. I was never told she was in hospice. I was never told she was on her deathbed until it was 2 days before she died. Okay? I had already been no contact and I was standing firm, and I know, no, I'm not breaking no contact, and this is just the way it is. And I can accept it, and I am fine with it because, it is what it is. It is what it is. And the thing is that a few days after my mother passed away then, it was around 2 days after my mother passed away, I suddenly noticed that one of my sister's husbands was following me on Twitter. Oh, you think you're so cute. Oh, you think you're so sly. Let me just remind people, in case they forgot, that mobbing and stalking and harassing and gaslighting and threatening is illegal. And I will take legal action if this continues. So you want to mess with me? Don't think you're above the law. I don't care who you are. Nobody's above the law. I mean, hey, we just found out with Harvey Weinstein, he thought he was above the law. Not so much anymore, Mr. Big Shot. He thought he was above the law. And so a lot of times these people, after the loved one, after the narcissistic relative, whether it's your husband, wife, whether it's your mother, your father, after they pass away, a lot of times the flying monkeys rear their ugly heads. And, and this is what happened to me. It was vicious and malicious that they are still stalking me, spying on me, mobbing me, and trying to manipulate me. And so let's just say, they may think they're the masters of manipulation, and they may think that they are so cool behind their phone and computer. But I got a couple great tricks up my sleeve too. You could count on it. Next is that a part of the grief journey, a part of the healing journey, after the narcissist passes away. Now, many of you are going to be dealing with this. It might be this year. It might be next year. It might be 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road. We never know. But here's the thing. We don't just grieve that the parent died or that whoever it is, whoever the narcissist is. We don't just grieve that they passed away, but we grieve the life we never had. We grieve the parent we never had. We grieve the destructive pathway that was like a tsunami and just ripped our lives apart. We grieve because it's devastating and it's traumatic. And again, a lot of people who have dealt with narcissistic abuse, especially if it was your parent or sibling, oftentimes we do end up being diagnosed with complex PTSD because it's very, very traumatic. And, I don't know how anyone could feel good about that. How someone who is the sinister, malicious narc or toxic siblings, I don't know how they could feel good about themselves. How can they look themselves in the mirror, and how could they actually even think that God isn't aware of what they're doing, that they're not going to reap what they sow? I take comfort that there's a higher power and God knows everything that is going on. And, I know that in the end, I can't worry about other people and how hateful they are and how vindictive they are. And instead, I have to focus on my own healing journey and practice self-care and get out in nature and, do different things like wear my wonderful, here it is, my wonderful little rhodonite. It's a crystal. And on one side it has that, and the other side it has a little heart. I love hearts. And so this crystal is a healing crystal specifically for grief. It helps us to tap into our emotions, to express our emotions, because hey, we're human. And when someone passes away, whether it was someone who we had a good relationship with or a painful relationship with, we still grieve. We still grieve. And so I'm doing a lot of therapeutic, holistic things that are helping me along my healing journey. And as I mentioned, I feel like I really am handling my mother's death far better than I ever imagined. I feel that, there could be good days and there could be some rough days, but all in all, I feel like I'm doing great. And I know that I am on the right path. And I know that there's so much more ahead of me in this future. So if you'd like to share with me about your own narcissist, did they pass away? Are they on their deathbed? Did your toxic siblings keep information such as the funeral or the death of your parent? Did they keep it from you? Maybe it was your spouse. There's a lot of different relationships out there. So share with me if your narcissist passed away or someone who was toxic and abusive to you, and how did you handle it? Are you still working through grief? And if you'd like more inspiration, you could go to danaarcuri.com. Thanks and have an awesome day.